Welcome into another episode of the News for Jags podcast. Jamal St here alongside Justin Barney. Justin, Jaguars had their first loss of the season.
Yeah, 2 games, and 2 games in, we're sitting at 1-1. And I think with the loss to the Chiefs, disappointment from that game. Your defense played absolutely phenomenal. Your offense lays an egg.
That's a good word. Disappointment is definitely a good word. I think the phrase that I keep saying has described the feeling is it's just week 2.
Right.
And the one thing that I also keep coming back to is Doug Peterson would say it's just week 2, whether they won that game or they lost that game. That's just how he is. So I think he does actually believe that. It is a long NFL season. Mm-hmm. It is just week 2. So Jaguars have 1 win and 1 loss to their names. It's not the end of the world. Take the hand away from the panic button. Everything is okay. All right, let's talk about some of the things that went wrong for the Jaguars in this game. You're pretty much starting in with the offense, right?
Yeah, offense. Awful offense. Yeah. Offensive line struggled. Anton Harrison, I mean, you're going up against an all-pro in Chris Jones. He's teaching you lessons, but a little surprising to me that Anton was bullied that much from a guy who missed all training camp.
Yep.
Had not, practiced, but maybe 3 days leading up to this game, and Chris Jones was the game changer in that game. And I think the offensive line, that's been something that obviously they spent a first-round draft pick on.
Right.
And made big additions last year. Brandon Sheriff, signing him to a big deal. And you just aren't that good. You regressed at that unit. Now, take that with a grain of salt because Cam Robinson, arguably the team's best offensive lineman, will be back after week 4. But, again, if there's a weakness that's been shown, PFF, they were not a high-graded team last year on the offensive line. You take Jawan Taylor out, who, by the way, had a terrible game against Jacksonville on Sunday against the Chiefs. Chiefs signed him to an $80 million deal. Jawan was terrible in his return to Jacksonville, false starts and holding and everything. But the offensive line did not grade out well last year overall. This year, you subtracted a guy, you added a rookie. I don't know if you're any better than you were last year, if not a couple steps worse. So that's not a position that is going to improve at this point in the season. You are what you are. When Cam gets back, I think you saw the ceiling of them last year. How big of a problem is this going to be? I know it's week 2, but do you sound the alarm bells at this point in the season about the offensive line? Can it get better?
I think the offensive line can get a little better. I'm not ready to ring the alarm bell yet. Reinforcements are on the way. Today, Cam Robinson officially back in the building. He can't get back out on the field for a couple more weeks, but he is in the building. So there's a couple of things that when we talk about the offensive line struggles, which they did struggle, I don't know. Like Walker Little probably played the best of the bunch, and he didn't play perfect. So there were problems across the board. Again, we got to go one by one. Anton Harrison is going to be fine. He's a rookie, and we talked about it, and people were coming after me in training camp when I was like, rookie hasn't looked that great. He's a rookie offensive tackle. One of the biggest jumps when you talk about going from college to the NFL is offensive linemen. The closer you are to the ball, the faster the game changes. So Anton Harrison is going to struggle. By next year, will he be probably a very solid starter or good NFL player? Yes. Right now, he's going to take those rookie lumps. Veteran tackle, struggle against Chris Jones. No reason to panic. He's going to start these games. He has to take these lumps now so that way he can be better on the back end. Brandon Sheriff's dealing with an ankle injury, a pretty serious ankle injury. So he didn't play great, but there's also a scenario where if the Jaguars have some of the depth they wanted to have, he might have sat that game out because of the injury. So Brandon Sheriff probably going to be fine. He's an Iron Man kind of guy who's going to keep playing and play through things, but he is dealing with an injury that is relatively serious. Luke Fortner, same thing, dealing with a lower body injury. He's at the center. He didn't play great. Hasn't played great in the first game either. When did he get hurt in the first game? We never really got clarification on that. That injury to both of those guys is why I'm willing to kind of say, okay, they're not 100%. They need to heal up. It's going to take some time, especially when you're still playing on it. Ankles are a big thing, for any position on the field, including offensive line. Ben Bartch did not play well either, and he's one of the guys who he didn't get much training camp.
Yeah,
he missed most of it on the PUP list, still recovering from an injury from last season. How prepared was he for the regular season to start? Because he didn't come off the PUP list until basically the end of training camp. And keep in mind, on the PUP list, he can't do a whole lot. That's more rehab than working on his game and getting football ready. And because of the situation, because of the scenario, they needed him to be ready to start. So that's why I think the offensive line can improve. Like, once Ben Bartch kind of slowly gets his way up to speed, he should be able to get better. Walker Little's been fine. I think he's played well, but there's reinforcements coming at left tackle because Cam Robinson's on the way back. What do you do with Walker Little at that point? You probably move him inside, and then that sends Barks to the bench. Does Fortner and Sheriff get healthy? If Fortner and Sheriff are still banged up, do they use Tyler Shatley to spell one of them? Now you start to get more options because right now those options are pretty thin. Like if one of those guys goes down, then you're looking at Blake Hansa having to start. And if Blake Hansa is starting games, then who's your swing tackle? There's a lot of questions. They're thin on depth. Depth on the offensive line isn't a problem until it's a problem. Well, it's a problem now because you got two guys banged up and you have none. So ultimately, yes, they can improve. There's reason to believe that by midway point of the season, once Cam's back, once the changes have been made, that they should be at a better point than they are right now. But right now, it's a problem.
Yeah, it is. And, I thought the loss of Josh Wells to injury, he parted ways with the team with an injury settlement, was big for a depth perspective. He could have been that swing tackle, could have been the inside guard. I mean, that was a big loss just from a depth perspective. In this situation, you have a Brandon Sheriff. I mean, he could possibly sit out if you had a good swing tackle or swing guard, a guard who could get in and fill that spot and let Brandon Sheriff heal a little bit. Cooper Hodges, another guy who the Jaguars loved, he made the roster as a 7th-round pick. He was injured during week 2 of the preseason. So, again, you've got these depth issues where the offensive line was not highly rated last year. I think it graded out at 24, 25, 26 PFF, and you lost Juwan Taylor. Yep. You added a rookie in there. So just by those metrics, you're going to probably take a couple steps back in that mix. And now you're dealing with guys who are banged up and injured. Right. You got 2 of your starters are not healthy. I mean, an ankle injury is tough for anybody, but can you imagine an offensive lineman who has to use that, the ankles and knees on every play,
bending,
to plant and to move and stuff. So you're dealing with 2 guys, ankle injuries notoriously, just like hamstrings, very nagging injuries that can hang up for a while. Yep. And again, you're asking these guys on an offensive line that wasn't the best last year, to play through injuries, play through pain, and there's not a lot behind them depth-wise, at least until Cam Robinson gets back. That opens up some creativity and some options on that line. But through 2 weeks of the season, I would almost unequivocally say the offensive line has been a disappointment so far.
Yeah, the offensive line's a problem right now. That's the biggest problem on the offense. Yep. I know a lot of people are pointing the finger at Press Taylor. Look, at the end of the day, I understand the Press Taylor news. I feel like if the Press Taylor news came out at the beginning of the preseason, nobody would be concerned right now. But it comes out like a couple hours before the first game of the season. The Jaguars' offense looks out there, and then it's fresh in your head, and you go with it. Keep in mind, again, I keep trying to hammer this home. He was calling plays in all of those second half comebacks last year where everybody was like, oh, the offense looks so much better in the second half. They're a second half team. That was Press. Mm-hmm. Press was calling those plays. So we can't act like, oh, all of a sudden Doug needs to take back the reins and that's going to be the magic fix for everything. Because realistically, last year, the offense was better in the second half, especially in the late parts of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the easy culprit right now. I think there's rust. You're going into a new season, new faces and stuff. So, again, I think there's a learning curve. I thought that week 1 Colts game was a little bit more rust than anything. They picked things up in the second half. They won that game. Didn't look great, but, had a game that was probably comparable to some of the games they played last year. They had a great second half comeback. Press Taylor was calling plays in second halves of those games where they made those exceptional comebacks. So, the Press can call the plays. It just, for whatever reason, it's been a disjointed start for the offense. I think the offensive line has a lot to do with that. The growing pains with that. The running game has just not gotten started. Another kind of a lull of a game yesterday. You just didn't have that success. Tank Bigsby has fallen out of the equation at this point, probably from the week 1 issues. But I don't think you've got a lot of confidence in that offensive line at this point in the season to be able to give Travis Etienne the ball and have him get a 120-yard game. And I think it's a combination of rust, injuries, inexperience, and you played 2 good defensive lines in those games. DeForest Buckner's an excellent player for the Colts. Sure. Chris Jones, even with 3 days of practice, you see what kind of player he is. Mm-hmm. But it's been disappointing that this offense, which had 31 in the opener, could not do anything more than 3 field goals against the Chiefs. The Chiefs were there for the taking yesterday. It is unbelievable that the defense played such a good game. I mean, such a good game from start to finish. I know they gave up a few big plays. Patrick Mahomes passed for 301 yards. But 17 points. You hold the Chiefs to 17 points. Had you told me going into that game, Jacksonville was going to hold the Chiefs to 17 points, force 3 turnovers, I would have told you they win this game by 2 touchdowns. That defense performance was totally wasted on Sunday, and I think that's the most disappointing thing when your offense, you're at the 1-yard line, 3 feet to go, and you cannot. You don't even do a running play. You don't do that, and you have to settle for a field goal. That is just unacceptable. Unacceptable to me. I mean, defense played the game of the season already, arguably, and they've had 2 great weeks in a row. You gave up 14 to the Colts. You know, that the other touchdown was a scoop and score. You have played 2 exceptional weeks as a defense. Mike Caldwell's defense has been unreal, and you're 1-1. You should be 2-0.
Look, they've done everything they could have done. The defense has.
Yep.
I mean, they've created takeaways. Mike Caldwell has called 2 fantastic games to start the year. So look, ultimately the defense is doing what they need to do. I mean, they did everything but score the ball themselves. The offense just had to be better. And the expectation is that they should be better. I mean, look, I can't think of a game off the top of my head. I haven't done any research, so don't go stat check me here. But I can't think of a game where you end up losing by 1 score, but you had 3 catches in the back of the end zone. And keep in mind, the guy caught the ball, but just couldn't get that second foot down. Zay Jones had 2 shots at it. And we've seen Zay make those plays, that toe tap, that toe drag, and you're like, oh, is it in? I mean,
Calvin had 2. So there's 4 of them. So
4 of them. I can't think of a game with that many where it was just that margin of error, just that much. That was the difference in between, a whole different ball game. I mean, if those guys get that foot in, we're talking about the Jaguars winning that game and cruising to a victory. So that just goes to show sometimes the margin of error in the NFL is very small. In college, that's a touchdown catch because they all got 1 foot in. They just couldn't get the second foot to drag that could get that toe down to get the catch. And I can't think of another game with that many opportunities that would have truly made the difference in a game.
So that's 4 opportunities right there. I mean, Calvin had the play, and he caromed into the goalpost, the padding on the goalpost. He had another play at the end of the game. Jacksonville's last drive were pushed out of bounds. They had 2 of them. I mean, if one of those catches goes in, you're talking about a completely different ball game. And those plays have gone Jacksonville's way in the past numerous times. We saw it last year, Zay Jones against, I believe, the Ravens. I mean, so many times those have gone for Jacksonville. Yesterday just was not Jacksonville's day. And it's so disappointing because that could have been a statement game, a chance to sink Chiefs to 0-2, to prove you've arrived, you've narrowed that gap, and it comes to pass that your defense couldn't stop Patrick Mahomes last year in 2 games, and this year they stop him. And what have you? The offense responds with 3 field goals, and you can't score from the 1-yard line. I mean, just an unacceptable performance. Calvin Ridley did not have a good game. There were drops. There were inability to run the ball. You've got to put something offensively together, and I think it starts with the offensive line. I think you've got to find a remedy for that. Find something that works. I don't necessarily know that it's Press Taylor's play calling because, again, there's a body of work for the entire second half. Last year when they had an unbelievable second half run and Press Taylor's calling these games where they came back and had unbelievable finishes. So I don't think that's the problem. I mean, is Press Taylor calling the first half of games this year so big of a change? No, I don't think that's the call. I think Press is going to get the blame for a lot of that because the offense has struggled. But again, I think it's a combination of rust, not having the talent on that offensive line, and maybe losing a little bit of confidence in that scheme.
There's a number of different things. I mean, the one positive you can take from this is the Jaguars have a kicker.
That's true.
Look, they trot Brandon McManus out there, and without a doubt, he drills it right through, no question marks. I mean, look, we liked Riley. Riley hit the game winner against the Chargers, but you were a whole lot less sure when Riley trotted out there if that thing was going through the uprights. McManus, he kicks it, and there's never a doubt. It's just going straight through there. And some people were trying to make something of him missing some kicks during training camp on the practice field. It don't matter if you don't miss them in the games.
Yeah, right? A 22-yard field goal, not a difficult one to hit, though.
Hey, look, but he hit 3 of them.
That's
true.
And
that's without a doubt. You know what I mean? So, look, we've seen kickers miss those in the league. So, at the very least, that is a positive that you can take from the game.
And the defense is unbelievable positive. So it's almost like the first week of the game. I mean, the Colts, nothing, all three phases of the game, we're not working against the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. All three phases of the game, we're not working against the Colts. So you can put those together, and this was kind of time and again last year. If Jacksonville can play 4 quarters, that's been the book on Jacksonville. Can you play 4 quarters of football? And a lot of times we don't see 4 quarters of football. So I think you've seen some good special teams this year. I think you've seen some excellent defense. Now the offense just needs to kind of come along and get up to pace. I think it will. I think it's a good group, but I think you've got to solve that offensive line problem with whatever metric you can. If we're still here in week 5 and we're talking about the issues that we've seen early on with Cam Robinson back there, assuming Walker Little's healthy still, and Anton and Brandon Sheriff, those guys remain healthy, and you add that, I think that's a huge boost. So I think week 5, if we're still talking about the offensive line being a big problem, the season is going to have some significant problems.
Well, I do think that like I said earlier, I think there's a chance that the offensive line can improve. I think health is going to play a role. I think availability is going to play a role. Keep in mind, Cooper Hodges is on short-term IR as well, so that's more depth along the offensive line. Even if he is a rookie, he's one that is highly thought of around that building. So, look, there are things that are coming, so there's reinforcements on the way. So there's reason to believe that it can get better. But, what is better? Do I ever think they're going to be a dominant I just don't see this group as a dominant offensive line group. Ultimately, this may be Brandon Sheriff's last year here in Jacksonville. It wouldn't surprise me. So there's going to be changes more than likely on the way for next year around this offensive line group. Cam Robinson probably not here next year either. So do I think this group this year can be dominant? No. I just don't think they are. I don't think that's who they are. Can they improve and be serviceable?
I think they're a functional unit.
I think they can get there.
I think their ceiling is probably where it was last year in the PFF focus. I think you're in that 22, 23, 24, 25 range. I think that is the absolute ceiling for Jacksonville's offensive line this year. When you've got all the guys and all the parts at their full strength, full health, I think in that 20, that early 20s to mid 20 range is the ceiling.
And that's the thing. So we're talking about an offensive line group that if they peak is a middle of the road group at the peak. So the more realistic mark, if you say, all right, the peak is you're 50% of the NFL. Yeah, so more realistic is you're a bottom 4th group in the league. Right now they're playing way bottom. They're playing bad. So that would still be an improvement. So I need to kind of say I think they can get better. I don't expect them to be dominant up here. I'm not even sure they're going to get to that middle of the road mark. That's going to be a tough spot to hit. What has to change is Doug Peterson, Press Taylor, the offensive coaches, Trevor Lawrence, they're going to have to accept what they got. Mm-hmm. And part of that is, all right, well, the play calling has to tweak just a little bit. And then part of our expectation is on 4th and 1, when we're why aren't they running it up the middle? And they're doing a pitch and things like that because they don't trust the offensive line. That's the thing that I think people don't always take from that is everybody's well, why aren't they, we've said it, we should have handed it off to Tank on the 1-yard line. Oh, they should have done this. They should have done a quarterback sneak here. They don't trust the offensive line. That's what that play call tells me is that, you don't trust your guys to get the push they need. You don't trust your guys to not get blown off the ball. When you, especially one time, a one-off, You don't put anything to it. Don't think twice. It's a one-off. Yep. He could have seen something. They could have audibled at the line. That's a one-off. But when they consistently do it, and keep in mind they've consistently done this dating back to last season. Remember that cute play against the Chargers that we all loved when they put the 3 backs in the backfield and all that. That was cute. That was I don't trust my offensive line to get me 1 yard. They don't trust the offensive line to get the push they need inside. It's plain and simple. The coaching staff has told us that. Doug he's shown us that with his actions. So you have to accept that. So now they have to accept that. Now the question is, Trevor is at his best when he has a clean pocket and can be back there and cook. Mm-hmm. We've seen him make some dynamic throws on the run and when he's rushed. Now he's going to have to do it more consistently.
Yeah, that's it. If you can get the push, and we thought Tank Bigsby was the answer to that, but again, you're not. it's just not happened so far.
Well, they tried. So, like this offseason, we looked at it, and they legitimately tried. I mean, they used a first-round pick on Anton Harrison, offensive lineman. So you go get that. You go get a big run-blocking tight end, Brenton Strange. All right, so we're committing. They're committing resources to doing this. Then you go get you a running back that's a short yardage guy and Tank Bigsby. Committing resources, but you can't fix the overall problem when you didn't necessarily either commit enough resources or commit resources in the right spots.
Right. It's a Band-Aid on a
that's it.
On a surgical wound. You're not gonna to fix the initial problems. You go in and you do surgery on that. That's through draft. That's through trading, free agency. Something you've got to address. Bolster the line. You mentioned Cam Robinson, probably not going to be here in 2024. Brandon Sheriff, probably a cap guy, also in 2024. And that's why you draft and develop Anton Harrison's. But again, offensive line, we knew going into this season that it was going to be an issue, even at full strength. It was not that upgraded of a line from last year where it was just a bottom third of the league in statistical rankings, offensive line. You did not improve that much. You hoped with some of the depth and the combinations you could throw at the offensive line, and just is not there. Then you add Cam Robinson's suspension, the injury to Cooper Hodges. You got two starters on the offensive line battling ankle injuries in week 2. So you had almost like the perfect storm of things happen, and already subtracted, Cam Robinson and Jawan Taylor from the mix. You are just trying to go as you may. And I'm sure Phil Rauscher is going to try to make some changes and adjust things, and you hope that the line stays healthy, and when Cam Robinson gets there, that addresses some of the issues. But I'm not overly confident that this is an issue. The offensive line is going to be addressed in its entirety until the offseason. I don't think you can.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. This is going to be part of the journey this season. Look, ultimately, when I did the schedule stuff, I never picked the Jaguars to win that game until last week. So when I did the Jaguars are still on schedule to win the AFC South, be in the playoffs. Like, don't get it twisted. I picked them to win last week just because I kind of felt good going into the game of where the Chiefs were. But in like the preseason, when we did all those scheduled mock-ups, and people were like, oh, I marked the Chiefs game as a L every time.
Yeah.
So this is still could be a double-digit win team. Like, no, that's what I'm saying. Don't hit the panic button. Bad offensive line team. Joe Burrow went all the way to the Super Bowl with a terrible offensive line.
Yes, he did.
Awful.
He did.
I mean, there were literally memes about, do you want a guy that can block or a guy that can catch? And the Bengals were picking every guy that could catch instead of giving this dude an offensive line. So, look, don't get me wrong. The Bengals doubled back and have tried to improve their offensive line along the way, but it is survivable. You just they have to lean into it. Trevor is going to have to lean into understanding that he doesn't have a lot of time. And the play calling also has to lean into that. The receivers need to lean into that, knowing that I got to get there in a hurry, and the ball may be in the air a little bit sooner than what they have to get there, and they have to do that, and then be willing to go make those plays. And the Jaguars have the talent to go do it. I mean, Calvin Ridley made an incredible catch. I don't care if Zay didn't get both feet down. Those were two great catches with a defender draped all over him. He was, again, inches away from touchdown catches. Christian Kirk made a fantastic catch. I mean, that deep pass, he was able to stop and get it, but that was underthrown. I mean, it wasn't a good throw. That should have been a touchdown probably on his own.
Yeah, Christian Kirk had a good game.
He had a good game. So they have the talent. I mean, we didn't even mention Evan Ingram. They have the talent to get it done and make those plays. So they just have to adjust some things and accept the reality of something that they probably didn't want to accept.
Yeah, and
adjust.
I think you do that. You do that with injuries and stuff all the time. But going into the season, I think the two areas that a lot of people were in agreement on was a pass rusher, the need for a bona fide pass rusher, and the offensive line. And again, we saw some good performances in week 1 from the pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
Not a ton against the Chiefs, but again, the pass rush you can almost.
Did you just say not a ton of pass rush against the Chiefs?
In terms
they
of
were
sacks.
harassing the dude.
In terms of sacks.
You're right. They didn't get the
Caleb
Chase on got sacked.
He did have his. I had to check the roster. I'm like, did they issue that jersey to somebody else? Because I know that's not Caleb on. But just in terms of the sacks,
yes.
Mahomes deceptive in a sense for the sacks with him. They did.
Yeah,
you make him uncomfortable. What he's such a good improvisational quarterback. I mean, the stuff he does.
He threw the ball to an offensive lineman twice, like to avoid a sack. That's why I had to stop the. We had to stop it. He threw the ball to Donovan Smith, and they still hit it. Andre Cisco took the big boy down the first time. He threw the ball to an offensive lineman twice. That's how harassed he was. Like Patrick Mahomes is normally like the duck on the water. Like everything's breaking down around him, and he's just cruising along with little feet under the water, going 100 miles an hour. But they had him harassed, rattled to the point he threw the ball to Donovan Smith not once.
I think Josh Allen going out with an injury hurt the pass rush.
Yes.
That was a significant injury. But again, Patrick Mahomes, you try and make him uncomfortable. There was not the pass rush on Mahomes as there was on Trevor. Obviously, I think that was two different things yesterday. But you did enough to beat Patrick Mahomes. But I thought the pass rush was better in week 1 against Anthony Richardson. You're still learning the nuances of the game. Yeah. And Mahomes, again, they did enough to beat him. I mean, Mahomes, some of the best throws he had yesterday was under pressure where he bought just enough time. I mean, the throw to Sky Moore was unbelievable.
The defensive game plan for both sides was good. But Trevor's good with his legs, but he's not Patrick Mahomes outside the pocket. So the Jaguars were trying to do a lot of, let's make sure that Mahomes doesn't get outside the pocket and then hope that the interior breaks it down. Trayvon and Josh did an exceptional job with that. They harassed him, kept him under pressure, sent some pressure. The coverage in the secondary, Rayshon Jenkins did a great job.
Darius Williams. Kelce. I mean, there were so many good performances by the defense.
I don't want to put Darius out there right now. I don't.
Forced a fumble.
He forced a fumble. He also fell against Sky Moore. That literally, the last drive of the game, that deep pass. Did you see that he fell on this? Yeah. So that slip and fall. And I'm not knocking the guy for slipping and falling, but he did slip and fall. And that's what gave up the big play that ultimately iced the game. I mean, if they could have got him off the field there, you give Trevor one more shot. There was a chance, but he slipped and fell. So I'm not willing to give him a game ball when he slipped and fell on a crucial point.
Disappointment scale. What are you on the disappointment scale today, 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10? Look, this is 10 the high or 10 like
10 is the ultimate high. 1 is you're not too disappointed. 10 is
I'm pretty close to an 8.
Okay, I was going to say a 7.
I'm pretty close to an 8.
Look,
I've been here since 2019. So we've covered a lot of losses. Way too many. I've gone to the locker room after every home loss since I've been here. That is the most angry locker room I've seen. And it's not close. And that's including after the playoff loss. That was the most angry locker room I've seen.
That's interesting because again, I think Jacksonville figured it's ready to take that next step. You've got to beat the Ric Flair. You got to beat the man. You got to beat the man.
You want to beat the man. You got to beat the man.
The Chiefs are the man, and you were the regular season game last year you weren't close. You lose by 10. Playoff game last year was a different level of disappointment because you were there. You were in that game. Jamal Agnew fumbled. That was a backbreaker. But again, you're 27-20 on the road. Can't beat Mahomes in the playoffs. But yesterday was a game where you said, okay, the gap has narrowed. The gap is narrowed. We're ready to stand and slug with these guys and show we can win. The Chiefs are reeling. Your two of your 3 best players are coming back in their first game in quite some time with Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. Everything was right for the taking. You hold them to 17 points and then lay an egg. So I think that disappointment factor is elevated for a game like that because that's a stage, that's a proving point game. You had the chance to prove it, and your offense goes out and lays an egg.
Well, it's almost like a couple of the games last season where we kind of came back and said, look, they had a shot. They had almost 21 point lead on the Eagles last year, blew it. Against the Chiefs the first time, they could have had a touchdown, dropped it. I mean, there were missed opportunities. That's the same thing. But these missed opportunities were that much closer. Again, back to those touchdowns. Almost, I thought Andre Cisco had a pick 6 early in the game, and he just dropped it. And, those are the missed opportunities that can change a game. They know that they had that game, and I just missed it by that much. And the Chiefs kind of escaped with one. And I think that's why that hit them a little bit harder. That was the most upset I've seen that group is because they felt like the plays were there. Even though they didn't play great, the plays were there, the opportunities were there, and they just came up that off on them.
You hold Patrick Mahomes to 17 points. How often is that going to happen for any NFL team? It just doesn't happen. It's not an every week occurrence to hold Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid to 17 points in a game, and you really feel like it got away from you. Who cares if that was at home or on the road? You could have played that at a neutral site and you'd still feel that same way because you don't get those opportunities. This would have been not a kill shot on Patrick Mahomes, but you put the Chiefs in uncharted territory. You're 0-2 at that point. Patrick Mahomes has never been 2 games under 500 in his Chiefs career. So,
right.
I mean, that's a shot where it says, hey, we're guys in the AFC now.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pay me some attention, not the other way around. We've already beaten you. We'll see you again in the playoffs. But that was a statement game, just like that Patriots game in 2018, where you had a chance to come out and knock the champion down, put them on the canvas, and you let one out of the bag. But on to the Texans.
That's on to the Texans. We'll be talking about the Texans a little bit later in the week as we kind of move through. We'll have another podcast coming your way then. We just want to get this one out to talk about what's a tough loss on a non-victory Monday, whatever you want to call it, loss Monday. I don't know. But yeah, we wanted to kind of reflect on that game. Hey, we'll have another podcast coming your way a little bit later on in the week as we get ready for another AFC South game. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.